Hi everyone, this is Anushka Vora, a company secretary working at Vinod Kothari and Company. Today, we are going to discuss about corporate governance requirements that arise in companies post an IPO. Before we begin, let's have a basic overview on why this topic. Of lately, there has been huge IPO rush in the market. Since July 2020, almost 48 companies have come up with an IPO, which includes companies like Burger King, Zomato, Indigo Paints, and many other companies have started to embark on this modest voyage. Now, there has been a huge myth around the IPOs. The myth is that the process of IPO starts when the prospectus is filed with the SEBI and ends when these stocks make their debut on the exchanges. While there's a well-known fact that the grass is always greener on the other side. The launching of the IPO, the listing of shares on the exchanges might seem to be all fascinating. But what we need to understand is that it is the rigorous preparation of the companies for almost a year or two. Somewhere between filing the prospectus for the exchanges and listing of shares in the process, we tend to undermine the profound hard work of the companies. Today, with this discussion, we are going to demystify the myth around the IPO as we see the life-changing journey of a company from private realms to public markets. So without further ado, let's start. Firstly, the contents which we are going to cover in this presentation is basics around IPO, complexities in going public, functions and compliances post-IPO, and challenges and risks practically that a company might face. So the first question which needs to be addressed is, what is an IPO? Now, consider a company as a North String. It takes birth when it gets incorporated, it develops when it gets converted into a public company, and it grows when it gets listed. So with this, we understand that if a company wants to come up with an IPO, it needs to get itself converted into a public company, which would be the first step. So what is an IPO? How would we define an IPO in basic terms? If a company wants to raise funds from the public, then it needs to come up with an IPO. IPO can also be termed as purchasing from the primary market. There are two types of market, primary and secondary. Primary market is when we buy shares from the company itself, either through IPO or by way of offer for sale. And secondary market, purchasing through secondary market is when we purchase from the stock exchanges, which would be possible only post an IPO. Next we see is, how can a company bring an IPO? Here talk about some legal requirements, sections, regulations, which would govern a company if a company wants to come up with an IPO. Firstly, it's section 40 of Companies Act 2013. Section 40 states that if a company wants to raise funds from the public, it has to make an application to the stock exchanges and get itself listed. Secondly is SEBI Issue of Capital and Disclosure Requirements Regulations 2018. Now this is a wholesome set of regulations which are applicable on a company if it wants to come up with an IPO. It covers the starting from the eligibility criteria, the conditions for listing, to the procedure, the compliance, and the post-compliance requirements also. Now, why do companies come up with an IPO? Before we actually start to raise the post-corporate governance requirements, we need to see what incentivizes the companies to come up with an IPO. So here I've listed 6 points, which could be the 6 probable reasons why a company wants to come up with an IPO. The first is exit route for existing shareholders. Now, the existing shareholders might want to take an exit from the company. In case of an IPO, there is a fresh issue and there can be offer for sale. In case of offer for sale, the existing shareholders offer their shares to the public and they take an exit route. In case of Zomato itself, there was an offer for sale. There was fresh issue by the company and also offer for sale. The largest shareholder of Zomato, which is InfoEdge, offered its shares to the public. Second is repayment of debts. The companies might want to get rid of the debts and want to clean off their balance sheets, and they can raise funds for this very purpose. This is also a very common reason which I have found in many of the offer documents. Next reason is brand image and increased visibility. If the shares of a company are listed on the stock exchanges, it's known to the public, it's known to the regulators. It increases its brand image, and the companies become lucrative for mergers, amalgamations, and other restructurings. Next is employee growth and retaining talent. We all have heard about employee stock option plans, and we also know that the underlying shares have the capital appreciation. Now, when the shares of the company are listed, the companies offer employee stock option plans to their employees or managerial personnel, which is a very lucrative option of remuneration, and also a very good option for companies to retain talent. Next is expansion. Finance is the lifeblood of every organization. Every company needs finance funds to raise, to carry out on a new project, a new venture, to expand and diversify its business. So this is also a very common reason why a company wants to come up with an IPO. Next is access to capital. If a company shares are listed, it becomes known to the public at large. Its credit worthiness increases. The companies can easily approach banks and financial institutions, and can even tap the capital market to raise further funds. Next, here I tried to cover an IPO trend from a timeline of 2015 till 2021. Here, if we see the 2021, almost it's August, it's been 5 months, and around 36 IPOs have come to date. So we see that the market is booming right now. Next, we talk about the complexities of being public. Now, getting listed on the stock exchanges, listing the shares is not a very easy task. It brings in itself a shed load of liabilities, obligations, complexities for the companies. There will be new set of shareholders. Since the shares are subscribed by the public, I offer the shares of the company to the public. There are going to be new set of shareholders. The shareholders will be from diverse background, from different perspective. Then the company's responsibility towards their shareholders increases manifold. Here I would like to refer Regulation 4 of SEBI LODR regulations, which talks about the certain responsibilities which the board of directors have towards the shareholders, which includes disclosure, transparency, and the like. Next is more responsibility towards the regulators. Along with MCA, the company is now going to be governed by SEBI, by stock exchanges. So the listed companies cannot be sleeping at the switch. They have to be alert about the updates, the changes that comes in the regulations, and they need to adhere accordingly. So that there are no stringent penalties or any criminal allegation on the company. Next, we have is good governance. Now, there are two kinds of investors. The first lot of investors are those who actually look for the financial parameters in a company, and then they invest in a company. They actually go for financial ratios. And the other lot of investors look for non-financial parameters, which in India, we majorly constitute the non-financial parameters. So, good governance is on the top of the agenda of these investors. So a company needs to ensure that before getting listed, it complies with all the corporate governance requirements. It has that proper board structure and everything. Next we have is ethical practices. Now, if a company's shares are listed, if public has invested into the company cannot afford to engage into malpractices, or company cannot be simply investing the money or siphoning the funds. The company has to have has to comply with the ethical practices, so that it also wins the interest and wins the confidence of its investors, of its shareholders. Market dynamics. We know that market is very volatile in nature. There are ups and downs in prices. The rumors in the markets affect the prices of the shares. So here also the company needs to be very attentive and alert if there is any unusual activity going on in the market for which the company becomes aware of, the company should immediately inform to the stock exchanges and take the corrective measures. Next, now we come to the important functions post IPO. These functions basically needs to be fulfilled and needs to be complied with before the company files the offer document or the prospectus. So there are, firstly we start with the board structure. Here I've taken an example of a private company director. A private company has to have minimum 2 directors on the board. Now, where post IPO, which means now a company is getting listed, company needs to have minimum 3 directors on the board. And since a company is getting listed now, it also has to comply with SEBI LODR regulations, which states that not less than 50% of the board shall comprise of non-executive directors. Independent director. As a private company is not required to appoint independent directors. Post listing or before getting listed, the company needs to ensure that 1/3 of the total number of directors comprise of independent directors, where the chairman is non-executive, and 1/2 if the chairman is executive, or 1/2 if the chairman is non-executive but is related to the promoter. Next, we have woman director. In a private company, the requirement of woman director is not there. But as we move on to getting listed, every listed company has to have one woman director, and top 1,000 listed entities by market capitalization need to have at least one independent woman director. Next is KMPs, which are key managerial personnel. As a private company, KMPs are not required. Post IPO or before getting listed, I need to ensure that the company has full-time key managerial personnel. Next is company secretary or compliance officer. A private company has to have a company secretary, a full-time company secretary, where the paid-up share capital is 10 crores or more. Then, before getting listed, there's this requirement of full-time KMPs, which would include company secretary, and regulation 6 of LODR becomes applicable, which states that every listed entity shall have a company secretary as its compliance officer. Next, we have is audit committee. So we talk about committees here: audit committee, NRC, stakeholder relationship committee, risk management committee. So the first 3 committees, all these 4 committees are not required in case of a private company. Now, before getting listed, I need to ensure that I constitute the audit committee, nomination and remuneration committee, stakeholder relationship committee. In the case of risk management committee is mandatory in case of top 1,000 listed entities. Next is retirement by rotation. In case of private company, section 152 subsection 6, which talks about retirement by rotation, is not applicable. But before getting listed, now I need to ensure, I need to amend my articles to ensure that among the total number of directors, I have not less than 2/3 who retire by rotation, who are retirable by rotation. Next, we talk about board procedures. Now, it is an irrefutable fact that even if it is a case of a private company or a public company or a listed company, all these companies have to have at least 4 board meetings. There's no debate about it. But why the board periodicity is important here is because generally if we see the case of privately held or closely held companies, they just conduct the board meetings for the namesake. They have to ensure that they have at least 4 meetings in a year. So they even conduct meetings on an uneven intervals. But when a company is listed, there are certain agendas which need to be taken up to the board on a quarterly basis. So this makes the predetermination of periodicity of board meetings a very integral step. Also, the agendas, the items which the company decides to take up to the board are also very important. If there are some agendas which needs to be intimated to the stock exchanges before well before in hand. And there are certain items which when transacted at the board meeting, need to be intimated to the stock exchanges within 30 minutes or 24 hours of conclusion of the board meeting. The prior intimation is prescribed under Regulation 29 of LOTR, and the post intimations which need to be given to the stock exchanges are under Regulation 30, paired with Schedule 3. Next, we talk about finance function. Now, why is finance function important here is that as a private company, the investors are not interested in the balance sheet of a private company. I mean, the general public are not interested because they have not invested their funds. They are not concerned about the financials. But when a company is a public company, the shares are subscribed by the public has invested funds in the company, they need to be sure of their investment. And that warrants enhanced disclosures on the part of the companies. Possible areas of change with respect to finance function would be accounting standards. The company might want to revisit their accounting standards. The financial results of the company need to be reported at a particular frequency. Trading window closure. There is a concept of trading window closure. Now, what is this trading window closure? For a listed company, each and every kind of information is price sensitive, be it change in the composition of board, acquisition of a new project, acquisition of any company, or a resignation of any director. Financial results, each and every information is price sensitive. So, in order to ensure that the information which is price sensitive is not used in a way to to earn more profits, the concept of trading window closure is there. Till the time the information is made public, till the time the information gets available to the general public, it is a price sensitive information which could probably affect the prices of the shares in the market. So there is a concept of trading window closure for that. Next is expanded disclosures. Now it's not like the board's report of the company will not be of that 10, 12 pages black and white report. A company now needs to prepare a consolidated annual report, which includes the annual CSR report, the corporate governance report, the business responsibility statement report, the management and business administration report. Next is website. So the process of moving towards a listed company also includes revamping of the website or creating a website if there is not already one. In case of private company or in case of an unlisted company, the Companies Act 2013 would be applicable, and Companies Act 2013, there's no such requirement. It does not mandate the companies to create a website. It only provides that if there are certain information which the company has to disseminate on its website if it has one, but it is not mandatory required to have a website. But when a company is now about to get listed, it needs to comply with Regulation 46 of LOTR, which states that a company needs to have a functional website. Now, what do we mean by functional? Is that it should be working. Any change in information should be updated on the website. There is a list of items under Regulation 46 which the company needs to have on its website. Next is Code of Fair Disclosure. The Code of Fair Disclosure is required under the SEBI Prohibition of Insider Trading Regulations, and it also has to be disseminated on the company's website. Now we come to policies and codes. There are several policies and codes which a listed company needs to prepare. So before getting listed, the company needs to prepare a list of policies and codes which needs to be documented first. It needs to be approved by the board, and then it also needs to be disseminated on the website. So a list of policies is mentioned here. As per the listing regulation, the company needs to have policy on preservation documents, material subsidiary, code of conduct, vigil mechanism, materiality of related party transactions, archival policy, dividend distribution policy, remuneration policy, diversity of board of directors, risk management policy. Under PID regulations, there's code of fair disclosure, which needs to be documented, and code of conduct. Next, we talk about the immediate obligation which arises on the company's post it gets listed, which is Regulation 32. Regulation 32 talks about the the title of the regulation is Statement of Deviation of Variation. It states that a company shall utilize the funds which has raised through IPO only for the purposes that is mentioned in the offer document or in the prospectus. In case there is any deviation or variation from the projected utilization to the actual utilization, that statement needs to be disclosed to the stock exchanges. That statement also needs to be approved by the audit committee and then sent to the stock exchanges. While Regulation 32 is applicable only when there has been deviation or variation from the projected utilization, yet there are companies who voluntarily file the same with the stock exchanges and also get it approved by audit committee, stating that there has been no deviation or variation. This is the companies do this just as a fact of good corporate governance practices. Next we address some practical challenges which a company might face when it goes for an IPO. Managing the price fluctuations. As we have talked before also, that the markets are volatile. The prices fall and rise, and it is very important to keep track of the prices. Any unusual activity, the company needs to keep track of any unusual activity, any media rumors, any rumor or gossip in the markets which has affected the prices. How can a company address this? Is the company needs to ensure to have a robust reporting mechanism, which means that if any such information is made available, is known to the company, it needs to be disclosed to the stock exchanges. The company needs to take corrective actions at the first instance. Next is changes in organization structure. We have already seen that the organizational structure completely changes. The hierarchical structure changes. The board of directors, the independent directors, women director, and there is a complete revamping of the organizational structure. So the practical changes which a company might face in recruiting the board or creating a new board structure can only be ensured if a company is prepared beforehand. So this is the board preparedness. Next is keeping in mind enhancement of shareholders' value. Here we do not talk about the shareholders' value in monetary terms, rather we are talking about their long-term interest in the company. So here, if the company resorts to only ethical practices, does not engage in any malpractices, then it could ensure that the long-term shareholders' value is also retained and the confidence of investor is in the company. Next is regulatory risk. As we have seen that a plethora of regulations and laws becomes applicable on a company when it gets listed, there are changes in the laws which happen on a very frequent. The changes are very frequent. Law is very dynamic, and the regulators keep on changing, introducing new changes, substituting changes as per the market requirements. So here also the company has to have a fixed compliance calendar, and the updations, the required changes should be made in the compliance calendar, and this compliance calendar should also be disseminated to the entire organization by way of an email dissemination or any kind of software, so that the entire department or the entire organization is educated about the changes. Because when a company actually gets listed, the securities market regulator, they work for the interest of investors, and there are fixed deadlines, timelines which a company needs to comply with to avoid any penal actions. So to ensure that a company does not misses any deadline or timelines, the company has. So that was all for today's discussion. What we understand from all the discussion which we had today is that the IPO is not just a buzzword, but it brings within itself a shed load of liabilities, challenges, complexities for an organization. Here, the role of a company secretary becomes very vital. The company secretary has a major and a key role to play in getting the company from a privately held company to a public company and to get itself on the stock exchanges. The company secretaries need to armor ourselves for facing the market before we actually enter the capital market with the IPO, or just to simply avoid the downside surprises. We hope that you liked this discussion on IPO, which shall be further coming up with our more videos in the series 5PO. In case of any suggestions or queries, you may put in the comment box. We also have an article on on making the companies ready, corporate governance ready for an IPO, which can also be viewed on our website, and the link for the same is also mentioned in the description box below. Thank you for watching. Thank you so much.